Today on the Mr. Maple podcast, Tim talks to collector turned nurseryman Mr. Bryan Rule about his North Carolina garden.
Hey guys, I'm Tim, and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. Today we got a fun podcast for you. Today we've got Bryan Rule in-house. We're going to be talking about his North Carolina garden. And y'all, we work hard to bring you a weekly podcast here on the Mr. Maple Show about Japanese maple and Japanese maple gardening. So if you're on your favorite podcast platform, go and find us, give us a 5-star review. That helps more people find us. You know, and as always, we do a YouTube video that goes along with this on the Mr. Maple Show on YouTube. Go check that out and get involved in the live chat. Those airs on Sundays at 8 p.m. And make sure you hit that like button for that as well.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that we're doing these podcasts now. It's so cool to be able to just hang out and talk plants. And all of you guys that listens makes that possible for us, me and Tim, to just hang out and talk about plants, which is our favorite thing to do. So the podcast comes easy, I think, for us just because we could sit here for hours and just talk about Japanese maples and everything else. So
what's not to love about Japanese maples?
That's right.
So Bryan, you've went from Oklahoma to North Carolina. You've got your North Carolina garden now. For anyone who wants to check out the Bryan Rule's original podcast we did with him, it's titled "From the Ultimate Maple Collector to Nurseryman: Bryan Rule Maple Journey." Mr. Maple Podcast number 33. Go check that out. You can get the full story of Bryan Rule. But in short, Bryan was a customer of ours who moved from Oklahoma to North Carolina to come work and be a part of the team here. And it's been a awesome time. The whole time Bryan's been here, it's just, he's added so much to the team.
Yeah, it's been a great experience. You know, whenever I come out here, I wasn't sure, like, you know, what role I was going to play, but it's been really cool to see kind of just everything growing with the company. You know, we've grown a lot. All the crazy greenhouses we've built since I've been here. And, like, you know, our YouTube channel also has been growing like crazy.
It just hit 20,000 subscribers.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, the podcast, I mean, everything, it's been really cool to be a part of all of those different things. And of course, you know, on the plant side of things, I've quickly regained my collection of Japanese maples and many other plants.
So, Bryan, you have how many Japanese maples in your current North Carolina garden?
I'm around 150 right now, in a relatively, you know, small garden, but I've tried to focus a lot on dwarf varieties and then, you know, sprinkling in some of the larger ones around that just to kind of maximize my space. But yeah, I've got a pretty good collection going again, and I feel really good about it. Things are starting to kind of develop nicely, and I've got a good plan going.
And how big is your lot of land that you're on right now?
Just sort of like a half acre. So it's
so you're limited on your space. So what are your criteria for Japanese maples? Because you work here, so you've got options to get, you know, 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples.
Right.
So what's your criteria when you're looking for a Japanese maple? What makes it speak to you? Yeah,
it is a tough place to be sometimes because there's so many great cultivars, and obviously I don't have space for them all, or I would just get them all. But so I do have to kind of start, you know, putting things into criterias and prioritizing certain characteristics that I'm looking for. And I kind of break it down to where it's like, if there is a group, say a variety of a dwarf variety, like a hime, I just kind of, there's 4 or 5 just in that one little group, right? Like a hime and all. So I just find my favorite of that group and get the one instead of the 5 or 5 that I would normally.
Now, how many do you have from the Makawa Yatsubusa group?
Now, that one I've gone a little bit crazy with. You know, it's fun because, you know, you get to kind of, I've gotten to get a new collection going. So I've got to really, you know, handpick, like, okay, I grew this one before, I liked it, but I'd like to try a different one that's going to add something new to my garden where I can experience new things. So,
all right, let's start talking cultivars.
yeah.
Let's start talking cultivars. So what are some of the cultivars that have been standing out to you?
Well, I've got a lot of garden designs and things in my mind. I've got a lot of young plants right now, mostly 1 gallons. I've sprinkled in some 10 gallons that I just couldn't resist. But it's been really fun collecting again. I would say, right now, one dwarf, I'll just bring this one up just because it's just really been performing well, is Kuro hime. I mean, that thing is like crazy. I picked up a 10-gallon of it because I just could not resist. It was a nice, mature one, had a beautiful structure on it, huge trunk on that thing, and the colors were just unreal. These pinks in the spring, and then what I really liked about it too was the samaras on it were just like standing above, they were kind of like reaching above all of the small little leaves. So it gave like this hot pink and then this like red coating over top. It just looked crazy. I love that cultivar.
It puts on spring interest.
Yeah.
It puts on summer interest with new growth flushes of, like you talked about, that purple red kind of color coming across it. It's got the samaras on it on mature specimens that are pretty outstanding. And it's a consistently good fall color Japanese maple as well. And so all the way around, that's just an awesome plant. And it's an upright dwarf. So it has lots of branches that come upwards rather than branches that grow laterally, which a lot of the dwarfs, grow some horizontal habit to it. Yeah. And that one is an upright, very dense dwarf that is pretty spectacular.
It has a very natural bonsai look to it. Like it looks like a very old tree, but very small. You know what I mean? It's got really nice branch structure to it. It looks like you've really pruned and meticulously train this thing to look that way, but it did it all naturally without any kind of technique or anything. So I really like that about it. And, right now it's kind of got a nice summer color too. It's kind of this like blue-green color with the samara still kind of a little red on top of that. So it's always kind of, every time I go outside and walk my garden, that's one I got to walk by and check it out, see what's going on.
That was part of a bunch of Japanese maples that made their way to the United States in 2008. And the Maple Society meeting happened there in Japan in 2008, and a lot of Japanese maples made their way back from Japan through some import regulations that, they found ways to get them back during that time. And that is one of those plants. Yeah. And so, believe it or not, it's a really new introduction in the nursery trade in the United States because, 2008 is not that long ago.
No, it wasn't, yeah.
And it is such a cool plant. The name translates as Black Princess. And it is such a tight little dense dwarf. I think it'd be an excellent one for bonsai.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that cultivar to anybody, even a beginner, because it's such a great looking plant. That is really kind of low maintenance too. You're not having to feel like you got to prune on it or anything like that. It has a great natural form to it. I've been really impressed with that one. And I've gotten into like comparisons, like I like to compare different cultivars, and right now I've got kind of a trio going on that I like. I've got Jordan, Acer shirasawanum Jordan, I've got Summer Gold, and then I've got Sunny. So and those are like those brilliant yellows out there in the garden, and it's really cool to kind of watch them. Now I'm growing pretty much everything in my backyard of my garden is in full sun.
Yeah.
And we're in zone 6B here in North Carolina. So I'm enjoying this new world of like, I can put things in full sun. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. But even with that, there are some cultivars where you're pushing, a little bit of that. With Jordan, I would say, just looking at the three together, they all are very unique and different from each other. But Sunny right now, I think is probably the star. Summer Gold's a champ, right? Like it just always performs. But Sunny's kind of that new up and coming one that and it's really impressing me, man. It has this really nice kind of pale white yellow color to it when you give it nice full sun out there. Very little burn on it. It's going to be one I think will continue to impress me because it's young right now. It's not even really that established, and it's handling full sun. So imagine in 5 years, that thing's going to just be.
And those are interesting ones to look at because all of those are technically Acer shirasawanum X palmatum hybrids.
Hybrids, yeah.
Because Summer Gold is a palmatum X shirasawanum that's a sister seedling to Jordan, and then Sunny was a chance seedling from Jordan.
Right.
And so you've got all in that kind of lineage. The only other one that'd be kind of in that lineage right now too is Anti-Rain, which is Variegated Sport on Summer Gold. But yeah, Summer Gold's always a champ. It can handle the sun very, very well. Sunny is one of those plants that's new to us. I mean, it's a plant that we're learning more and more about. It's got amazing that orange spring color and then goes to the yellow.
Right, yeah. It does kind of set itself apart because of that spring color, I think. Really does play an effect on as far as where it stands in my collection. You know, when I look at that plant, I'm always looking for something a little extra that makes it stand apart from especially when I'm comparing like a grouping together that are similar. But Sunny definitely, but you know, Jordan, I can't not speak about Jordan because like it's just electric, man. Like I love that it seems to have more of that shirasawanum influence to it. Just when you look at it, it has that more full moon, you know, feel to it. And so I absolutely love Jordan as well.
And Jordan's got that thing where it looks like a palmatum on the new growth fleshes. Yeah. And then as it matures, it looks like an Acer shirasawanum. And it often confuses people when people think, hey, I got the wrong plant. But that's just because it's hybrid nature. We list it as Acer shirasawanum because it does look more shirasawanum. It has that more full moon leaf on Jordan than, you know, on a mature plant. But it's such an amazing plant. Young plants may show a little bit of a burn. And I'm surprised, you know, even your Summer Gold is a young 1 gallon getting planted out there during that first year. But once they get established, they start to do better and better. And Jordan, we've been over to Dr. Criticos' house and shot a specimen video with his in Flat Rock, North Carolina. And he has a large specimen in full sun that looks fantastic even during the summer.
Right.
But, you know, young plants may need a little more protection from the hot afternoon sun than a plant that's more mature.
Yeah, it takes some time. And I think that's, as a gardener, you know, you have to have that patience and just attention to care. If you want a plant to perform well in your garden, you have to really pay attention to it and give it, you know, what it needs. You know, we've had kind of a hot couple of weeks. Normally, I don't have to water. We get a lot of natural rain here. But over the last couple of weeks, I've had to get out there a few times. And, you know, I've got a lot of young plants that are freshly planted in the ground that maybe been there for 6 to 8 months. And I've had to give them a little extra attention during this kind of dry, hot period of time. And I think as a gardener, that's one thing you got to remember, especially when plants are young. You know, you get excited, you plant them all out there, and then summer hits, and you're like, oh, man, what's going on with my plant? You know, well, it just takes some time for it to get established, get a root system that spreads out where it can find plenty of water naturally. So you have to kind of supplement some of that watering.
And here we've had unusually warm weather. I mean, our air conditioning here in our office hasn't been able to keep up. My air conditioning at home went out. And then went to my mother and father-in-law's, and their air conditioning wasn't keeping up. And so it's very unusual weather here in Western North Carolina, and those plants are still doing pretty well out there in the landscape, which is pretty awesome. So you got any other fun pairings out there?
Yeah, you know, so I like to think about pairings too. You know, one of the things I was really interested in was just showing contrast between two similar cultivars, but trying to accentuate their differences, right? And so in the front yard, I planted a yellow threads, Acer palmatum yellow threads, and then I planted across from where the sidewalk is, so they're each one on each side is a punctil, Acer palmatum punctil on the other side. So I've got yellow threads, which is a beautiful golden yellow linear lobum, and then on the other side, I've got this beautiful dark red linear lobum with punctil. So it's a really cool pairing. I mean, they're young now, but they're nice size 1 gallon. So I can see it in my mind as they grow, you know, just how I can see those comparisons.
That's a pretty cool pairing. I mean, you've got the yellow threads, which is the new introduction from Buckholtz.
Yeah.
It gives you more of the yellow colors, the most yellow form of that linear lobum strap leaf style. And then on the punctil, that's a selection from South Korea, the Chilipo arboretum. And then you've got this, you know, deep, one of the darkest red, like a purple red color of a linear lobum. So those are starkly contrasting colors, but similar texture with
Right.
that open, airy kind of bamboo feel.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going for. Even though they're both linear lobums, I was trying to highlight the differences between. A lot of times, if when you're thinking about, well, I've got a linear lobum, it's like, well, there are a lot of major differences even in that group of planting.
I know what you also have planted there near them are your Indian summers.
Yes.
And so that's contrasting textures right beside that.
Right.
Where you've got these huge Acer japonicum foliage.
Absolutely.
That is starkly different than the linear lobum habit.
Right.
And so you've got just contrasting colors with the yellow and the purple, and then you've got a green, large Acer japonicum leaves right there.
Yeah.
And so you're just playing on contrast.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's certain cultivars, and I know as the collectors out there that are listening, you just can't resist, And so Indian Summer, Acer japonicum Indian Summer was one that its fall colors, man, are insane. Like literally, you feel like this cannot be really all on one plant. I mean, it literally goes through the color spectrum all at the same time, all on the same plant. It's insane. And so I was like, I got to have two of these, and I want to put them right out front of the house, one on each side of the sidewalk, so that in the fall, man, that thing just lights up and gives me a beautiful kind of display in front of the house. So I'm excited about watching those grow. They're doing really well. I've got them kind of in a shady spot, so I'm hoping those leaves get bigger and bigger and bigger as they mature, and which gives a perfect, palette for that fall color on it.
That is pretty awesome. And you've also got your garden enabler. You've got Frances.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, she moved across the country so you could have a job in growing Japanese maples. And you constantly just keep putting more and more maples all around the yard.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much fun, and she is just a top-level plant person, too. She understands plants very well. She has a beautiful garden going right now. We've got our corn is like giant. It's like the tallest corn I've ever seen in my life. Ears growing all over it, and we've been collecting tomatoes and broccoli. And I mean, it's just been really fun. We both kind of have our own little garden projects, and so a lot of times you guys might see me post in some of the Facebook groups and things. I refer to it as the rural gardens because my wife has the vegetable garden and I have the maple garden. So we have a nice blend there of gardens.
Nice, nice. So out of all the Japanese maples, which do you think is Moonrise still your favorite?
It's got to be. I mean, it just performs so well. And right now, I only have one. I'm sad to say it. Like, I keep thinking I need another one somewhere. But I have so many others that I want. I'm like, well, at least I have one, So, but it's a great plant, man. Like, I actually have a Moonrise up by the front porch that will be growing there up by the front porch. And then on the opposite side, I have the Blue Moon. So, I love Carl Munn's introductions. He has so many great plants. But the Moonrise and the Blue Moon, are just like those just classic shirasawanums that just get me excited about Japanese maples. And I thought that would be a great place to kind of highlight both of those up front and popping against the house. I think that nice golden yellow color and those spring colors also would just really play against the backdrop of the house.
It's hard to not talk about, how great Moonrise is.
Yeah.
Because it's so much more heat tolerant, so much more vigorous than some of the other Acer shirasawanums, and it puts on so many amazing colors that it has lime green with like apricot to pink reds all across it, all throughout the summer. And when it stops and it's lime green, you're like, oh, that's really cool. And then that new growth flush just happens again.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh man, this plant is on fire. And it's one of those plants that just puts on colors all throughout the season. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why we love so many of these different plants. I mean, you keep talking about all these different plants. You're like, man, look at all these colors. Man, look at all these colors. And I think that's why people love Japanese maples, is just this constant, ever-changing out there in the seasons. And so you're always anticipating what is going to happen and what it's going to do next.
Yeah, it's so much fun to just to kind of use Japanese maples as I've talked about this before. It's almost like you're painting a picture and you select the color, right? And you're like, I need some of this color here, and I need some of this color here, this texture here. And that's kind of what I've been doing in my garden. I've actually on the side of my house, I've got kind of a nice heel side that slopes down and then kind of comes back up and then goes back down where the lower part of my yard. And whenever I first saw it and I was thinking about planting, I was in my mind, I was like, it kind of feels like the heel, some of the mountains that I see in North Carolina. And so I wanted to kind of play off of that. So I planted some azaleas there, some rhododendrons. And it's kind of a shady spot. So I picked a few of the Ghost series, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, this would be a great, nice shady spot for some of the Ghost series. So I've planted in there an amber ghost, which is, a phenomenal plant.
It's one of the best of the Ghost series. It just keeps putting on that amber color.
It's so great. I love the reticulation on that too. It's so vibrant whenever it comes out. It just has that amber glow to it. It really does. I've got some pictures on that cultivar that I caught that I think it just speaks like so true to what that cultivar does. You should definitely check that out on the website.
And it was pretty heat tolerant for you in Oklahoma, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It's one of the most heat tolerant of the Ghost series. And to me, I think it has one of the best fall colors. The fall colors on that can really be a bright orange to bright orange red. Right.
And it is just outstanding because you get amber, you get this green reticulation with a little bit of cream, and then you get the amber color across it during the summer, some pink colors, and then a completely different fall color as well.
Right. I've got a couple of other ghosts in there, Uncle Ghost, and I believe I've got a purple ghost in there as well. But I was like, trying to just play off of, what you would see kind of in the mountains in a fall setting, right? And so I've got a japonicum in there, a yamakagi. I wanted some really vibrant colors in there. So, that's what I'm saying. Like you can just pick these different cultivars that have such unique characteristics, and you can paint a picture with it. I love that concept, and that's kind of what I try to do in my garden design is just like find a spot and say, what do I want this to look like? And just start painting those pictures with those different cultivars.
All right, lace leaves. What lace leaves do you have in your garden?
Oh man, I've got some good ones. I've got actually just to kind of stay where we were at in the garden on that little hillside. I've got a waterfall planted there. I was like, man, I want that thing to just kind of weep down the side of that hill. It's beautiful fall. It's orange fall color, yellow orange fall color. It's phenomenal, man. I absolutely love that cultivar. I think every garden needs to have a waterfall.
It's a classic. It's a classic. And, Verdis may be the same cultivar as that. It very much likely is. But that green weeping lace leaf that goes to the yellows to oranges in the fall is just outstanding.
Yeah.
It is such a classic one that mostly everybody should have in their garden because it's so dynamically, it just makes a presence out there in the garden with that weeping arching habit.
Yeah.
That graceful habit and the lace leaves. It's a perfect tree for anyone's garden.
Right. And I think, we talk about it a lot of times. Sometimes the name really makes a plant, and I think that waterfall name, you're like, man, I've got a waterfall in my garden. That just sounds much cooler than like Verdis,
And as the story goes, there was a Verdis planted at a waterfall at a state park in New Jersey,
right.
and it became Waterfall.
Right.
And it's very likely the exact same plant because it was a Verdis, but an amazing plant with that arching habit. And it's a classic one that's been in the nursery trade now since the 70s.
Right. Yeah.
Verdis was in the trade since, they started bringing Japanese maples from Japan. And
it's tried and true. You know what you're going to get when you get that plant. It's going to perform well. It's going to give you consistent fall color. And that orange sometimes, like it just looks like it's like a neon orange out there. I had one in Oklahoma that I loved, so I had to get another one when I got here. There's a lot of cultivars that I had there that maybe I haven't gotten yet just because I wanted to experience some new things. But there are those classics like that, or just ones that were just amazing, like a waterfall or moonrise. I had to duplicate those.
So what other lace leaves do you have?
I've got another great one, Baldsmith, Acer palmatum Baldsmith. That was one that never really was on my radar. I'd seen it, but until we got some 10 gallons in, it just never spoke to me until I saw it in a bigger size. And I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. This thing, the spring color, I had never seen that kind of pink on a lace leaf before. You know what I mean? Like there's something special about that level of pink on that lace leaf in the spring. It's just crazy. I love that plant.
Yeah, it can really give you some really nice shades of that pink purple that are just unreal. I mean, that brighter picked up pink.
Yeah.
That are just outrageous with Baldsmith. I loved when we shot our cultivar highlight with it, and Matt just got all corny with it and made up a history behind it. He said that it was an introduction by Bartholomew Smith, who was a blacksmith, and he was bald. And I'm like, sure enough, that's going to come in some description somewhere,
right,
because people often use our videos as facts, and normally we always have facts in there, but that one was just one of those days where
and you know, like again, sometimes with names, you know, you might hear of a cultivar and it may be that the name doesn't speak to you at that moment, but like this cultivar definitely has something I think every, you know, real maple collector or even just casual gardener is going to appreciate. The lace leaf on it, I'll speak to this a little bit. It's very finely dissected. Like it really has this kind of frilly look to it, very finely dissected, which gives it a nice texture added. You know, you got that pink color going on, but the texture of it really speaks to it.
It really does. And that's one of the ones that just has this nice sort of graceful appearance where it's weeping, but you're looking so much at the color changes that's what draws your attention.
Yeah.
You're like, man, it feels like that's all what we're talking about on this podcast, or color change Japanese maples.
Right.
It's like, what's Bryan Rule love? Color changes.
Yes, absolutely. I do love that about maples in general. I mean, there are very few plants that can give you that widespread array of color, you know, like, and maples has always been that plant to me that just took everything in nature to the next level. You know what I mean? Like, it really does elevate everything that is around, and there's so many contrasting colors within itself and other plants, which kind of goes into, I'll jump into this. So one of the things I love about my garden here is I've been able to plant some more conifers, and which in Oklahoma I had a hard time with that. The high heat and humidity there was really hard on conifers, so I didn't grow very many there. And so I was like, when I came here, I was like, I want to get my garden to be balanced. You know, I wanted to have that winter interest. And I've got
95% Japanese maples, 5% conifers, right?
Right, exactly.
That's the right balance.
That's the right balance. But you know, the Japanese white pines are like my favorite. I most of what I have are those, and because they just have such a great texture and shape. You know, like they all, even when young, you know, they have these interesting shapes, very like Japanese style, without really doing much to them. They just have that look. And so adding that evergreen interest in my garden's been really cool.
I love the Japanese white pines. I love the Japanese black pines. And I do like some of the white pines that are, you know, the white pine selections in the United States. I mean, those are my favorite conifers as well.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to the evergreen conifers, those are outrageous, and the ones to me that add a lot to the Japanese maple gardens. But coming down the list too, you've got Shigure bato. You brought that back. You got a Shigure bato. You had that in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You also have that now in your North Carolina garden.
Yes.
And that is a lace leaf, kind of. It's really more of a Matsumori that looks like a lace leaf.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what I love about it. Like, it's kind of this, it's in a weird place. I don't think there's really any other maples that kind of fit that category. It kind of stands on its own. And I think just texturally, I think it really brings something interesting, because you look at it and your first instinct is that's a lace leaf, until you get up on it and then you realize, wait, no, that's not as dissected as what a lace leaf would be. So you're more in that Matsumori leaf style. But you have these nice serrations on the edges, you know, and it just has a different texture. And then as far as a beautiful green color, right? But then its fall color is phenomenal. I mean, this thing lit up for me in Oklahoma. I had it kind of in a shady spot in the back corner. And when it turned fall, I mean, you just ignored all the other trees because your eye went straight to that glowing orange in the back there. And it was just really nice. You know, it would kind of start to get this yellow and then transition to a little, you know, flame orange to it. It is a great plant. I love the texture of it, and the color in the fall is amazing.
So, Bryan, you have one of the first Red Pandas out at MrMaple. What are your thoughts on Acer palmatum Red Panda?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been hyping it. I know everybody knows that. I'm kind of the ultimate hype man, but I'm hyping it for a reason because I have a pretty extensive Makawa collection right now. Most of the ones that you guys are familiar with, Mayday, Mystic, Japanese Princess. I've got even a few of the newer ones like a Nemo and a Koi, and so I've got a really nice collection going on. But that Red Panda, I'm telling you guys, when we get this thing out there, you're going to love it, man. I think it's really just the most interesting one that I have in my garden, and I'm speaking highly of that because I've got a lot of the others. It has a really cool leaf to it. I think it's a little bit different than what you would expect on a Makawa leaf. And then the bronzing, like right now, it's kind of got this like bronzing yellowish color. I've got it in full sun, but it's like this bronzing yellowish color. And then the new growth is popping over top of that with that red. It looks wild, man. It really does look wild. It really speaks to that Red Panda name. You know how it's got kind of those two-tone colors on its face? It's the perfect name for that plant. I love it, man. It's awesome.
I know whenever you made your trip to Oklahoma back and I was going to your house to feed your cat, I would go out there and check out your Red Panda.
Yeah.
And my wife would be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Just hold on a second. I'm checking out his Red Panda." And it still had color. And what time of the season was that? Was that in?
That was, let's see, we were about 2 months ago now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm still really holding some nice color.
Yeah. And we're looking here and it's almost August right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at, June.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was still holding its color, still doing fantastic. And it was just rocking it out in the garden. And I was just walking by, just impressed every single time. And I'm like, man.
Yeah, and it's been fun because I know this is a newer thing, that you guys have gotten, and so for me to be able to kind of trial it in my garden and put it out in full sun and see what it can handle and see what kind of colors it goes through, and I love kind of feeling like I'm on the cutting edge of some new maple, and I'm really excited to have it in my collection, man. It's awesome. I can't wait till we get it out. You guys are going to love it, man.
So we talked about the Makawa family collection, some of the ones that you have there. What about like that Ryusen, that Nakakomoto weeping style? What styles do you have there?
Well, I love the weeping. I've got the two that really stand out to me right now is I've got a Looking Glass Falls, and I have that over in my little mountain area that I was describing earlier. Where I was like, I got to have a Looking Glass Falls. That's a waterfall here in North Carolina. I'm like, if I'm doing a mountain scene, I got to have a Looking Glass Falls there, man. It's like the perfect thing for what that picture I was trying to paint, I love it how it's got that border on it in the spring. Really gives it something interesting. And for me, and I don't know if this is because I've got it kind of in a shadier spot, but the leaves on it stay small. Like it's kind of a smaller leaf, which gives it a little bit different look than some of the others. And then I've also got a Rikuzen shidare nearby there as well. So, and it's got that bigger leaf to it. Really cool yellow fall color. So I was really trying to play off of having two weeping styles, but showcasing those differences. That's what I really like to do. I like to pair things up. Even though they're similar, I want to showcase what makes them different.
And with Looking Glass Falls, that's a selection from our Area 51 collection of Mr. Maple. We put it in our Pendulous Treasures collection. And Matt and I, we were looking through these seedlings and we saw that border and we're like, that is unique. Let's watch that some more. And then we're like, this is pretty cool. And so we decided that, like the Japanese who name their Japanese maples after waterfalls in the area, we're like, let's just name it after one of the waterfalls here. And if you go into like a lot of Japanese lore or a lot of Japanese names, often they'll be talking about the drinking glass, the looking glass. And
right,
we're like, Looking Glass Falls is a perfect name for that.
Oh, it's such a great name for that. And it got me excited. I remember the first time we went and did a little hike and adventure to go check out the Looking Glass Falls. And then you had the cultivar. I'm like, yeah, I got to have that in my garden. It's the perfect name on the perfect variety, that weeping style. It just speaks to the whole thing. It makes you feel like you're adding a waterfall to your garden. So it's pretty awesome.
And then you said Rikuzen shidare. And that is actually a Japanese maple from a temple in Japan that got wiped out by a tsunami. And, it just has such a fun story behind it and just such contrasting foliage. I mean, there's not another large weeping, palmatum that has that larger leaf.
Yeah.
It's so starkly different. It's that Ryusen style in that weeping family, but it's different. It's the one that has a completely different style leaf, and the habit is just so graceful being that larger leaf.
And then just to top that, just to put the cherry on the top here, since we're talking about these beautiful weeping styles, you guys always come out with so many cool plants. I love it, man. So just a little ways down the hill, I've got Dragon Master. I mean, I thought those three together, it's just phenomenal, man. Dragon Master has some of the most electric colors, crazy orange in the spring, and then just this amazing like yellow and beautiful golden yellow colors. It gets kind of a little bit of a white hint to it too. If you give it enough sun, it really stands out. I absolutely love that cultivar. I'm so glad you guys brought that out so everybody could experience our golden Ryusen style with that amazing orange fall or spring color.
I was wondering if you had one. I knew you had one in your Oklahoma garden, and you always tried to push it in as much sunlight as possible to really intensify those colors.
Yeah.
And you'd always talk about that. But I've been wondering if you had one in your North Carolina garden as well, because that is such a very unique plant. And, Matt and I, we go through tons and tons of seedlings. And we try to look through as many seedlings as possible. And people bring us plants too and say, hey, this is new, this is different. But Dragon Master was one that we'd found here, and we were so excited about it.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of other seedlings that some of our friends had found, and they were like, hey, try it with this. And Dragon Master was the best one for us out of the grouping. And so we didn't introduce, some of the other selections that were similar. But Dragon Master just rocked it out for us.
Yeah, stood out from all the rest. That's awesome, man.
It had that leaf in the spring that's just an orange, and it's got that little bit larger leaf.
Yeah, nice round, large leaf. Yeah, it really does have its own unique look that stands apart from the rest of them.
And I love yellow.
Oh, absolutely. Got to have the yellow. Now, speaking of another great yellow, let's take it there, Tim. So one of the things I love, like pairings and things like that. So another trio that I have is the Heat Seeker series, man. I got a full sun garden. I got to have the Heat Seeker series, right? So I've got Hot Blonde, I've got the Hot Sauce, and the Hot Tamale.
Nice.
And so I created this large bed that's kind of in the corner of my yard with the privacy fence in the back. And then just out front, spaced out pretty evenly, I have those three. I have the Hot Blonde, the Hot Sauce in the middle, and then the Hot Tamale on the other side. So I'm like, man, I can't wait to watch those grow and develop. They've got so unique colors on those. The Hot Sauce, it's like the reddest red. Like I love just how deep that red is on that plant. And then Hot Blonde, just electric yellows. And then the Hot Tamale for me is it's like a variety of color, like you get like this kind of dark hunter green with these like red new growth popping over that. It just looks great, man.
Well, Hot Blonde, that was a chance seedling that Matt and I found, and we were at this arboretum and we were collecting seeds, and the only yellow in the area was an Acer shirasawanum aureum. This is an arboretum that really likes species. They don't like a lot of cultivars.
Right.
And so we often think that it is a hybrid between Acer shirasawanum aureum and Acer oliverianum. And it is more cold tolerant than most of the other Acer oliverianums that we've ran into. It's vigorous. It has a little bit of a red border in the spring like aureum can, and it gets more and more yellow. Yeah. And it wants the sunlight. It grows better in sunlight than it does in shade. And it just grows like a rocket. And that's one that Matt and I have just been super proud of. I don't know if we'll ever introduce something better than Hot Blonde.
Yeah.
Because it was a blessing that we really didn't see coming that just popped out of nowhere.
That's what's great about that cultivar is you can literally give it, it wants the sun, like you were saying, and the sun intensifies the color and it kind of accentuates all of the characteristics that make Hot Blonde that amazing. The sun just brings that all out, the new growth popping over that yellow. And it just It's just constantly changing. I love that plant. I think everybody, I think that should be a staple. You have all of these classics that you think about over the years, but I think Hot Blonde deserves to be in that category in all of these gardens, just because it would perform well for just about anybody, and in all kinds of sun versus shade scenarios. I think it would do well.
Now, the other two members of the Heat Seeker series that you talked about were actually introductions by Masayoshi Yano that we got to put names on. Hot Tamale, for instance, came into the nursery trade years ago as Nakahara Benny, but it was a code name. It wasn't supposed to be the cultivar name. And the real code name for it actually was Nakahara Benny B, and the B had gotten dropped off because people didn't know about Nakahara Benny A.
Right.
And Nakahara Benny A was hot sauce.
Right.
And so when we went to Japan, we had to track down hot sauce, Nakahara Benny A, and we were talking with Masayoshi Yano, and he said, no, those names are not supposed to be that way. That it simply means that it had red color to it, and it was heat tolerant. Nakahara is a southern region in Japan,
right?
And it was essentially saying that it would be very well a good grower for them, and it had some red color to it, and they were completely code names, not cultivar names,
right?
And so we asked him. We said, well, if we were getting these cultivars out there, what name would you want on them? He said, you pick a name, put on it. And so we went with we contacted him and said, is hot sauce and hot tamale fine for you? And he said, those work great. And so we did that and then brought it into the Heat Seeker series at MrMaple. I mean, both those plants are really awesome. We've been growing hot tamale for quite a while. And to me, that one is my second favorite of the Heat Seeker series because it is extremely, extremely heat tolerant.
Yeah.
I've been growing it for so long that people down in Texas have been growing it in full sun and just rave about its heat tolerance and how well it performs for them. But it almost has like a coral pink kind of spring color.
Yeah, it does.
And then we've noticed that in more shaded situations, it can give you a little more yellow fall color, but in more sunlight situations, you can get some oranges and reds. And so that has to do with the senescence that we learned about with Augusta when he came and visited. But it is such a great plant. And that, to me, it's probably my second favorite of that Heat Seeker series.
Yeah, it's been really cool just being able to kind of start a new garden. I've had a lot of people like, man, how many trees did you bring with you from Oklahoma? I'm like, man, I didn't bring any with me. I kind of left my mark there. I felt like, what I did there was something really beautiful, and I was proud of that garden that I created, and I hope that it's still, thriving and doing well. But I felt like, it just was something I wanted to leave that mark that I had left Oklahoma a little more beautiful than what it was before. So it felt good about, walking away from that. And then I knew, coming to MrMaple that it wouldn't take me long to get my collection back up and start designing a garden again. I love that aspect of it. As much as I love the cultivars individually, I think I love just as much the design, the collection together and how you can paint those pictures with each different cultivar and what color and texture you want. And then getting into conifers and flowering shrubs and all of those things that you can just create this beautiful space. I'm looking forward to watching it all grow. I've got a good start, and it's thanks to you guys. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, man, it's thanks to you, too. We love having you here on the team. Well, y'all, we hope that y'all have enjoyed this podcast on Bryan Rule's North Carolina garden. His cultivars that he likes, what he looks for whenever he's planting the trees out there in the garden, and some of his experiences with these plants so far. Make sure that you give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you're subscribed to us on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube show as well. We put out daily content there on our YouTube channel. We work hard to bring you Japanese maples, as much Japanese maples as you could ever want when it comes to the podcast and our YouTube show. Our weekly 10 at 10s on MrMaple. Make sure if you really enjoy this type of stuff and you can shop with us on MrMaple.com, please do.
We appreciate everything, guys. Thanks for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed this listen, and take care.
God bless.
Have a great day.